Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by the Nyaradza Group. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today I'm in conversation with Livingstone Gwata, the former Group Chief Executive of FBC Holdings Limited. Enjoy this truly quality conversation. Livingstone Gwata, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm happy to be here, and you know how time flies. I can see you refer to me as former Group Chief Executive of FBC Holdings Limited. It's now more than 10 years since I retired.
Wow.
So that's how time flies.
That's how time flies. I mean,
but it still feels like yesterday.
It feels like yesterday. You know, you're just taking me to, you are retired, and you retired at 60. What does retirement feel like? I asked this because, you know, as I was trying to get you onto this show, I think your diary sounded busier than mine. Talk to me about what retirement feels like.
Well, retirement is a totally different space. You know, grew up in the corporate world where you get all the support systems. You got a human resources manager, you got an accountant, you got a driver, you got a cook, you got a sweeper, you got a gardener, you got a caddy on the golf course. You got all these things that are surrounding you. In retirement, you're on your own. So I am all those things together. I'm my own investment manager. I'm everything. So that really keeps me busy.
What does it feel like? Are you enjoying it?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. You know, I wish it would have come earlier.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was exciting in the corporate world, but retirement. You do things at your own pace, and the rewards are almost instant because there's immediate feedback. Yeah.
Talk to me about the decision to retire. I found that fascinating, that when you turned 60, you deliberately, intentionally said to yourself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to retire. There's a lot of people watching us out there now trying to figure out, I am 50, I am 60, I'm 70. When do I retire?
Yes.
Talk to us about your decision-making process. What were the things that you're looking at as you're retiring?
Yeah, a lot of things went through my mind. You know, I had been with a multinational bank before, 24 years. And up to executive director level. And when I went into FBC, which was then called First Banking Corporation, it was a new bank. And I was chief executive for 14 years on the trot. Now, there is succession planning that takes place. So theoretically, for 14 years, I had some young techs that were wanting to come into this position. We were going through strategy processes every year in and year out. And sometimes, after 10 years, you will have done it all. So you need a new pair of hands to come with new ideas. And I was so happy that I had a team of young managers that had been prepared for a long time. But also thinking about retirement, 2011 was the year that you know, we had a more stable currency. It was a foreign currency, but it was more stable. And it was very easy then to make a decision that this is the time to retire, because then I could realize all the terminal benefits and so on in real money. And with a bit of hindsight, it was a very fortuitous decision because things did not work very well in the environment after that.
Well, could the financial consideration have been the biggest, or you feeling you'd had your time, you need to move
I really
on?
felt I'd had my time. Close to 38 years in banking, it was. I felt like I needed a change. The children or offspring had grown up. They had finished whatever they were doing. So the motivation to
go on,
8 to 5 kind of job was. But yeah, there were a lot of young people that also needed to get into that space.
It's fascinating for me, Livingstone, because it's not all of us who find it easy to let go. Am I right?
Yeah. It's a big problem in the corporate world, in the political world, in public service. Change sounds threatening to a lot of people. So when people are holding the reins and they are driving, they really don't want to realize that they've reached their destination and it's time to get off.
They don't want to be passengers.
No.
Livingstone, I find your career path, for me, unusual and inspirational in many respects. Let's start with your first job, 1968, at 18 years old, in a factory in Bulawayo, and ending up staying at a men's hostel. And you don't have kind words about staying in the men's hostel. I tell you what, my first job was as a gardener. And I think I was doing Form 4. My father said, my boss wants help. Come in and be a gardener. And that was fascinating. Talk to us about 1968, at 18 years, you find yourself in a factory in Bulawayo.
Yeah, very interesting. I was coming out of Goromonzi High School. We'd done our O levels. During that time, there were only 3 schools accessible to black people who wanted to do Form 5 and Form 6. And that was Goromonzi, Fletcher, and St. Ignatius. So there was a bottleneck. A lot of us that wanted to go to high school could not do it. Goromonzi is the school where I was at, but they had to cater for the whole country. It was a government school. So out of 2 streams, 2 classes, O level, they're going to take just a handful, probably 10 or 15, and then take the rest from the rest of the country. So some of us were having fun, Form 1 to Form 4. Others were pretty serious about what they were doing.
I like that.
So we had pretty good grades, but with only 3 high schools in the country, the choice was we had to go work somewhere. The principal at Goromonzi at that time had a friend, his name was Trevor Ncube in Bulawayo, that was running radiator and tinning works. And so the principal was Peter Darwin, probably got on the phone and said, well, I got a bunch of young peoples that are pretty good but could not go into high school. Could he take them on? And he took about a dozen of us. So we took the train, went down to Bulawayo, and that was our first exposure to factory working life. And
how was it like?
It was a shock. It was.
Talk to me about it.
Yeah. It was a bit of a shock. We were staying in a men's hostels. Men's hostels like they are these days, very crowded, very rowdy. not safe. Even a piece of soap could be stolen whilst you were taking a shower. So we found a room, and we thought we were very lucky. 8 of us, with bunk beds on the sides. And we thought, wow, we are very lucky. Here's a room that's empty. And we put our blankets and whatever. So
on the floor?
On the bunk
beds. Sorry,
yeah,
bunk
on the
beds.
Bunk
Yeah.
beds. And we went to work Monday. Come Friday, we went to the local pubs, had a drink or two, came back. We didn't realize that this particular room was the gambling center for the men's hostel. So people started trooping in with buckets of local brew in readiness for the gambling all night. And so it was a bit of a shock.
Wow.
It was a bit of a shock.
Real world, isn't it?
Yeah, so we had to join the gambling at the beginning.
Yeah.
But felt sleepy.
You can't sleep because these guys want to go on?
They're just going on. And of course, productivity in the factory, manufacture and repairing of radiators for the mines, for big trucks and so on. We're young people, the hands would get cut and,
Radiator and tinning, I remember it,
Yes.
the good old days. You raise a number of very important issues that we now forget, Livingstone. That is, your generation made it in a country where there were 3 high schools that took A levels for black people.
Yes.
You are that product. Look at you now.
Wow. Certainly, it's always something to be surprised about. But what that taught us was to persevere. So I didn't go to Form 5 and Form 6, but the experience at Radiator and Tinning Works was so tough.
What did it teach you?
That I needed to do something different.
Really? This is not for me.
Yeah, I needed to do something different. This was not going to be rewarding. What you call health and safety these days, it wasn't observed a lot during that time. So there were injuries. So after 3 months, I saved a bit of money, surprisingly, and to buy a train ticket to get back home, but more importantly, to buy a set of lecture notes to do my A-levels distance education. So on my way back from Bulawayo, going back to Marondera, the communal areas where I came from, I registered with what was called Rapid Results College for geography, English literature, and history. And I took those 3 subjects over a period of 7 months. I wrote all my exams. The grades were not fantastic, but I passed.
You passed them. That's what matters. Yeah. That's what matters. I'm always interested in knowing where the inspiration came from. Where did the motivation come from that I must do my A-levels by distant education? Had you seen an example? Where did the motivation come from?
Well, a lot of it came from my parents. Yeah. My father was agricultural extension officer, what they call Madumeni. My mother was a nurse. And as a couple, they were the leading lights in their own communities. And my father always had this dream. I let him down, I guess, because he wanted me to take education seriously up to doctorate level. He was always speaking about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He was always speaking about Booker T.
He had O levels, did he? Or he did JC?
He did JC.
JC?
Yes. Yeah. So he was talking about Booker T. Washington, and he was talking about these things. To him, it was as if achieving a certain level of education would bring instant success. I doubted that because after Bulawayo, I came back to Marondera and I was an unqualified teacher. I was beginning to enjoy myself as a teacher. But my father would come all the time and say, you are going to university. You're the first
You're
child
the first child?
in the family.
Out of 4, hey?
Out of
Six.
Yeah.
6 of you.
Yeah. You're the first child. You got to lead by example. So there was a lot of pressureness, and I was enjoying myself teaching. It was a bit frustrating.
1969 to 1970.
Being a teacher, and I then eventually went to the university, and it was a totally different ballgame.
So talk to me about, so that's the pressure coming from your father.
Yeah.
What about mother? Where is she in terms of the pressure? That is there pressure coming from mother, or is mother where you run to hide?
No, my mother was always supportive
Right.
of our father, but she was more easygoing. You know, she was quite happy for her offspring to find their level. But my father was saying, you got to do the highest. And
Well, what do you think, Livingstone, what's the biggest thing, the biggest lesson you got from your parents?
working hard, so my father being into agriculture, I remember from the age of 4. I was there leading oxen, ridging potatoes and so on, and doing these kind of things before we went to school, throughout my primary education. And so there was a lot of hard work, back-breaking work and so on. And it is always surprising that this was the threat that our parents used, that if you do not do well in school, you're going to be coming back here and working the fields. So
that was a tough threat.
It was a tough threat. So we spent a lot of our youthful days running away from agriculture. But it was agriculture that taught us hard work. There is nothing too difficult for me in terms of physical exertion and so on.
Because you did it.
We went through it. And throughout my corporate life, what other people found as hard work and so on, when I recalled what hard work was and so on, just mental calculations, writing out things and so on, was never classified as hard work.
As Nyaradzo, we strive to continuously bring convenience to our clients. Nyaradzo Group is proud to introduce Sawi, a new virtual chatbot assistant on WhatsApp. With Sawi, you are now able to interact with us from the comfort of your home and can be assisted anytime via WhatsApp. With life assurance products, diaspora products, applying and assessing your policy, payment platforms, claims information, and any other queries concerning payments, policy information, or products and services. Simply WhatsApp Sawi on +263 712 992892 or register and start interacting and receiving notifications from Sawi on WhatsApp. Now, join in and experience a new level of convenience 24 hours a day with Sawi.
You feel you, in a way, let down your dad because you didn't get the PhD. Have you taken on in adult life agriculture because of the influence that your dad had on you?
Well, okay. I grew up in an agricultural environment, and career-wise, when I went into banking, it also included agriculture in many ways. Went through a lot of studies as to what a good farm should be, what is required there, the cash flows. So I know a lot about agriculture. But that spell, as a young person, running away from agriculture, I was never going to go back to agriculture soon. It is rewarding when you do it well, but I spent most of my youthful days moving away
from it.
Moving away from that. So a lot of my colleagues, particularly those that grew up in urban townships and so on, they got a romantic attachment to
Agriculture.
farming and a romantic attachment to...
Romantic, I love that word.
But to me, it is very serious business. It is very serious business. When you get into it, you got to do the right things at the right time, or you will not succeed. So there's no romance between me and agriculture, but I'm quite certain.
Yeah. It's real.
It's real. If I were to do it, I would do it very successfully. But perhaps not in old age.
So Livingstone, you didn't get into farming. You haven't looked at it as romantic, as real work for you. Any of your siblings that were influenced to go into agriculture at all?
Well, not during their working life, as it were. My young brother, Lovemore, we are three brothers and three sisters. Brother that comes after me is looking after our parents' homestead now. Well, there's quite a bit of infrastructure, boreholes, solar power, and is growing crops there. He's raising cattle, goats, sheep, rabbits, chickens. The whole lot.
So he's into it.
He's into it,
Yeah.
and he's enjoying it. And I hope he's looking at the business side of it, because sometimes when people get very passionate about farming, they forget about the business side of it.
Yeah.
But
it becomes a hobby.
It's a hobby, but for me as a banker, there's always the bottom line. There's always the bottom line.
You as a banker, talk to me about your decision when you go to university. You then decide to study administration, hey? That's what you...
Yes, Bachelor of Administration.
Bachelor of Administration.
Yes.
Where did banking come in? In the first instance, why did you choose Bachelor of Administration?
Yes.
And when did the banking bug catch on to you?
So a lot of these things, you know, one does not take decisions deliberately.
Yeah.
So as far as the Bachelor of Administration degree was concerned, I was coming out of teaching. And the degrees that were available for black people then at the University of Rhodesia, you could either go into teaching into the law department, and the very bright ones could go into medicine. There was nothing else that was available.
That's fascinating.
So I did not want to go into teaching. The legal side of things was not very familiar with me. I wanted to go into business or into government. This was before independence. Yeah, this was before independence. So I wanted to go into business or government. But then, the government and the system there did not see any role for black people in government and in business. So it was a situation where I said, there's a new degree that's come on board, and it's called Bachelor of Administration. We're the first intake.
Wow, didn't realize that.
Yeah, so there was no Bachelor of Business Studies so there was just Bachelor of Administration. And I know that when we got in there were 16 of us in the first year.
1971.
1971. 16 of us in the first year. 4 of us in the second year. That was the rate of attrition. And 2 of us in the final year.
Wow.
And it was 2 of us that finished.
Do you remember the other guy?
Oh, yes.
Who's that?
Innocent Moti. Yeah. He's around. He's a business person, a farmer. Yeah, but there were 16 of us that started then, and it was...
and finally 2 of you.
Finally 2 of us. And of course, there were scholarships that were given by World University Service,
yes,
and so on and so on. But all these organizations were not giving scholarships for black people going into anything other than teaching, law, and medicine. So I had to get a loan from the university. My father was guaranteeing the loan. And in fact, at the beginning, there used to be a principal of what was called Range House College, Mr. Ken Ncube. He's the one that gave my father a loan to pay for my university because he thought I was passionate about what I was doing. And my father was now, had gone into retirement, opened a general dealer's shop out Kumusha, and as we went through school, that pulverized that general dealer, and he had to go back to work. But when he got this loan from Ken Ncube, he was repaying so religiously that halfway through the mark, Ken Ncube said, I can see you're a dedicated old man. Forget about the rest of it. It was my grant to this young man, and that was it.
Wow, yeah. Fascinating. What a break that was. And then you decided you did banking studies with the Institute of Bankers of South Africa. Why did you decide on banking?
Yeah. Okay. So coming out of university, I finished 1973. Graduated in 1974. After graduating, jobs were difficult to come by. The jobs were not available.
Because you can't get into government, you can't get into
business.
Yeah.
I attended, and this is no exaggeration, more than 100 job interviews. Yeah. Until eventually I got into then seat of Salisbury, as it was called, the predecessor to seat of Harare. And what they were offering there at seat of Salisbury was a monthly salary which was lower than the monthly salary I was getting as an unqualified teacher before I went to university.
Wow.
But I had to take the job just for access to a fixed line telephone.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because, you know, looking for a job without...
After 100 interviews?
After more than 100 interviews, nothing was happening. So, City of Salisbury job was just a stepping stone to look around. And then Standard Chartered Bank was looking at changing things. They could see that independence for the then Rhodesia, political independence for the majority was on the horizon. So they sent an instruction that Standard Chartered here, it was then called just Standard Bank of South Africa, actually, was required to take on black graduates. Then I was given a shout by some employment agents, and I went there for an interview, and they said, well, what do you want to do in future? And I said, well, I want to get into business or government when the country becomes independent. Said, well, okay, you can wait for that independence when it comes, but would you want to consider going into banking? So I said, yeah, I'll give it a chance. And so I went for an interview. And
with Standard Chartered Bank of Southern Africa or South Africa?
It was Standard Bank of South Africa, and their headquarters at that time was at Africa Unity Square. It was called Sisu Square then. And I was interviewed, and the personnel manager then made an offer. Well, I almost fell off my seat. It was like 5 times what I was earning at
Salisbury City Council.
The City of Salisbury. Yeah, so
you jumped at it.
I joined banking
as a trainee,
as a graduate trainee, and years after the country became independent, jobs were offered by government. But all those jobs were paying less than 1/3 of what I was earning already. So I got stuck with banking.
I must ask you this, because twice, if not 3 times, you've spoken about your desire to work for the government.
Yes.
Can you unpack that for us? What was the attraction? What did you want to do? What do you still want to do?
All right, okay, so growing up and in secondary school, as an unqualified teacher in the communal areas, the most powerful person was the district administrator. When we were still in primary education, these were called native commissioners. Yes. So that was the most powerful person. That was the highest earning person in the neighborhood. And we just always wondered, how does one become a district administrator? Okay, not a native commissioner. How does one become a
black native commissioner?
How does one become a district administrator? So you had to join government, and you had to have the qualifications and so on. So it was always an aspiration that when we do get independent, that's the job that I want.
Wow. Fascinating how what is modeled in front of us is what we are drawn to in this instance, the district administrator, the native commissioner is the role model, and that's what we want to do.
Yes.
Which speaks a lot about the responsibilities that we have, you and I, as we go on about our lives, unaware that we are actually role modeling for other people, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's very true. Okay, for me, now in retirement, of course, I serve on a number of boards as a non-executive director. The number of young people that will come to me, and some not so young, and just tell me about how I changed their lives and their decision making some 10 or 15 years ago. And
isn't that amazing?
It's incredible.
Isn't that fulfilling?
Well, yeah. Well, at that time, I would have thought I was doing something mediocre, but
somebody was watching you.
To a lot of other people, I was a role model of some sort. Yeah.
I think, for me, you've just touched on something that I'm very passionate about, which is you might think going on about your life, but somebody's watching you, somebody's taking notes, somebody's being inspired. Are you doing that in a deliberate way now in terms of mentoring young people? Is that something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, it is something that I'm passionate about. It's a very difficult environment, for our young people.
It is.
The choices are rather limited because our economy is not doing that great. So it's a bit depressing that a lot of young people are coming up to me and are looking for advice as what they should be doing outside this country.
Not in their own country.
Not in their own country. I would very much wish for a situation where I could give advice for young people to make their contribution right
Zimbabwe.
here.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Well, but talk to me, Livingstone, if you may, briefly about that graduate trainee program. You did it, if I'm not wrong, from 1974 to around about 1980, graduate trainee, until you were appointed branch manager.
Yes.
Standard Chartered Zimbabwe. Describe to me in a nutshell what that experience was and what it left you with.
Well, things were different then because one was expected not to specialize, but to learn every aspect of what took place in the business. So
all aspects of banking.
All aspects of the business.
Wow.
Yeah. So from day one, you could spend an hour or two franking letters that are going out to customers for you to see what happens when the correspondence is going out. I had to be a cashier, I had to balance the books. Computerization was not very high then, but computerization then came with big computers, big boxes and stuff. So we had to learn the backroom jobs, the front office jobs, and it was tough. But it was a very difficult situation because most of the banking employees were white people then. And for some of us to get into banking, it was a directive that was coming from London, which was being resisted on the ground. So to that extent, it was very difficult, but there were a lot of enlightened white managers that wanted to see us succeed. But they were colleagues.
Yeah. Do you remember an instance of racism that you experienced that humbled you?
Oh, yeah.
Can you share with us one instance?
Yeah. It was in the first 2 months of banking and working in what was then called as savings accounts department, and the supervisor, who was a very well-connected person politically, a white person, came to me and said, Livingstone, can you make me a cup of coffee? So I said, well, I see there are people that are employed in...
to do that?
To do that. So he says, no. I want my coffee with a graduate touch. Okay. At that branch, I was the only employee that I had a university degree. So you can see the dynamics. Very, very hardworking employees, very bright bankers that never went to university. Now, in comes
this black graduate,
a young black graduate trainee. So, yeah. So there were a lot of run-ins and.
Did you make the tea?
No.
You refused?
No. I told him to go jump in the woods, and he went and reported that I was rude to him high up the ladder, and I was called in for disciplining, and I explained exactly what happened to this senior manager, and in fact told the senior manager that I would have said exactly the same to him if he had said that to me.
Wow.
So that put
we forget that, isn't it?
Yeah.
In independent Zimbabwe, 40 or so years after independence, that people like you went through those experiences.
Well, yeah. So, but we were very patient people. We knew the situation, we knew the surrounding, the environment, and we knew what we were trying to achieve. So
you stayed with Standard Chartered Bank. You ended up being head of corporate institutional banking and eventually managing director of the merchant bank of the site. You stayed there for 24 years. That's a good run.
Very good run. I was there for 24 years, and I was at executive director level. Many times I acted as chief executive for the bank, but at that time, the business was not ready for change,
and by change you mean the business was not ready for a black chief executive.
No, it wasn't. There were many of us. I remember 3 other colleagues. We had to be posted somewhere else outside the country, to get away from this pressure that we got this guy that's qualified. I mean, the politicians. Every time the top bosses visited, they'll say, when are we going to have a black chief executive?
So London was ready for a black chief executive, but the white management in Zimbabwe were not ready for a black chief executive.
No, not really. London was not ready for a black chief executive because they wanted to balance this whole situation that was taking place.
Okay.
So the excuse they always gave was that a local national should not and would not run a business in their own country.
I see.
Right. But the politicians here, and I remember it was President Mugabe, and at some stage the finance minister, Herbert Murerwa, they said, well, they asked the top bosses coming from London, in my presence, they said, okay. So if local national
can't run,
who runs the bank in the UK? But anyway, that changed.
Yeah.
But
I get the sense, reading through your profiles and stuff, that at some point this became a frustration for you. And thankfully, First Banking Corporation came. And 1998 to 2011, which is 13 years, you were in the first instance managing director and then eventually group chief executive officer. The fascinating thing is that you participated in the listing of FBC, and you were instrumental. It's difficult, I think, for a lot of people, particularly me, to imagine FBC without Livingstone Gwata, even 11 years after. Talk to me about, one, the excitement around the listing, but importantly, building the brand, as briefly as you may.
Yes, well, thanks. So banking is one of those businesses where people make decisions with their heart rather than with their minds. When people will choose to be your customer or not to be your customer.
Yes, I see.
There's no real process. I guess what is important is a reputation.
Yeah.
So the older banks had been around almost 100 years. And this was a startup. And to convince customers, both individual and corporate, to become customers was always uphill. But I was fortunate enough to have a very solid management team that the market had confidence in, and we then built a brand from virtually nowhere. And we went into listing to move away from individual or single entity ownership, because in a bank you do not require a tycoon factor.
It's a bad thing. Actually.
It's a bad thing to have a tycoon factor, because then it gives the impression that the tycoon is calling the tune and maybe making very bad decisions. And so we went through the listing process, and from there we grew from strength to strength. A lot of banks in Zimbabwe did collapse. But what we learned from that was that the banks that were collapsing were the banks that were run by owner-managers. It's very difficult with money. As an analogy, it's almost like getting a hyena to look after a butchery.
It can't happen.
You see, to separate that this is stock, I don't have to eat it, and this. So owner managers, this is why there are all these governance issues coming from the regulators, that banking managers must be professional managers. People that are looking after the interests of shareholders, the interests of employees, the interests of customers. Not their own personal interests. So I'm glad to say FBC has survived the test of time, and it's one of the biggest banks in the country. It's one of the most trusted banks.
Apart from the fact that it wasn't owner managed, what other factors do you think explain the success of FBC?
FBC was successful because it was run as a professional business. There was no focus on who you are connected to, where you come from. What mattered was, were you skilled? What did you have to offer? And performance management. Performance management was the biggest factor. I would like to think to this day, because I don't think that situation has gone away. When I was running that bank, each and every employee could, at any point, do their own self-assessment and say, as far as objectives and targets are concerned, this is where I am. I'm a bit ahead or I'm behind. And more than 90% of the time, every one of them was spot on, was right. What I see in a lot of businesses is a situation, come end of the year, there is a lot of fights and arguments between the supervisor and the supervised. One saying, I achieved this, and the other one saying, you didn't. So performance management, when it is done right, you get to a situation where everyone is properly aligned, everyone knows exactly what they are supposed to do, everyone is passionate about what they are doing, and at the end of the day, these people have to be rewarded, and they would treat that business as their own. They would treat the customers as their own customers. And when that happens, you've arrived.
So it allows for ownership,
Precisely.
stakeholder interest on the part of the employees.
Precisely.
That's an important building block and management principle. What other principles are important to you, or have you become passionate about as you lead? So there's performance management. What other issues would you say to people getting into management, corporate boards and that kind of stuff are important to you? What would be the three most important principles?
Well, whatever one is doing, obviously, I mean, you have to be leading by example. You have to lead by example. You can't be telling people to do one thing and you're doing another thing. You have to be an honest person. You can't be saying, we're going to cut corners in this and do something, but sometimes we've got to do things right. you have to be consistent.
Yeah.
And you have to be a fair person, just broadly speaking.
One thing that I've gotten talking to you now is the importance of family, the way you were raised. You have two brothers and three sisters. I know you have 4 kids of your own, and I know you're proud of them. I know they've done exceedingly well. Talk to me about what raising your kids has taught you. Point number 1. And point number 2, what lessons have your children taught you? By the way, the public must know that I've been mentoring one of your lovely daughters who has taught me quite a lot of things. I wonder what she's taught you. What is bringing up those wonderful kids taught you?
Well, in terms of bringing up children, let me start off with my parents.
Yeah.
For us, it's 3 brothers and 3 sisters. They had certain principles. They had certain expectations in terms of what we achieved. Our parents wanted all of us to be university graduates. And
you managed that, hey?
Well, they managed it.
Yeah.
They managed it. 3 of us men and the 3 women.
University degrees.
They all graduated university
well
degrees.
Done.
And we saw the benefits of going through that. And after having my own children, of course, the standard could not be lower. than my parents' standard. So I expected my 3 daughters and a son to also go through university, which they did. Did very well. 2 daughters. First 2 daughters went to University of Cape Town, and They are in business. The third daughter went to Australia. She's an gynecologist, obstetrician.
Well done.
Of course, after 15 years
Yeah.
of all this specialization. And his son did his master's in Australia and is gone into banking.
Oh, wow.
So,
That must give you so much joy.
so yeah, it's something to be very proud of. The difference between ourselves and our offspring, we were driven by a totally different force. We're driven by survival. We were driven by wanting to run away from poverty. We were driven. I remember a university colleague asking me, what did I aspire to be? And my answer was very quick, that I wanted to own a car, a house, and a very good suit.
Which you have achieved.
Well, he met me a few years ago, and he says, "Wow, so you are bigger than life."
All
now."
the three were done.
Yeah. So we were driven by this kind of hunger.
And our offspring?
Now, that's where the difference comes in
Yeah.
now. They will get a suit, they will get a car, and some of them will probably get a house. And then the question is, what do they aspire for?
Yeah.
So their
What drives them?
yes, their aspirations are gonna be a lot higher because survival is not
It's not one of the things
is
that
not what
drives
they are
them.
worrying about now. So a lot of our offspring run the real risk of being overtaken by miles by offspring coming from less privileged backgrounds.
Wow.
Be-
Wow.
because the children from less privileged backgrounds are hungrier and they're very focused about what they want to achieve. And they will achieve that very quickly, much quicker than our offspring. And the good thing about life is something drives you, if it's survival, to achieve something. When you achieve it, it doesn't mean that you stop.
No, you keep going.
You keep going. You
Yeah.
you forget that when you started off, you just
It was survival.
You just wanted to buy a bed, but afterwards, you got all that. You just continue going. So that is the difference.
You know what you've just touched on right now is huge, and I'll tell you why it's huge. Because I was looking at your background. Father was an agricultural extension officer. Mother was a nurse, JC. Very humble.
Yeah.
But look at where you are right now. Our children are not that driven. They are privileged.
Yes.
But I think you and I are to blame also, because we sugarcoat life. We treat them in a manner that life doesn't treat the kids of the less privileged. Am I wrong, Livingstone?
No, you're very right. You're very right. It's called overcorrection. So most of us growing up would say, I want to achieve this, and I don't want my children to face the same hardships. And by so doing, we inadvertently disadvantage
Our children.
Our children. And we do not then inculcate higher aspirations in them for them to work,
aim for.
to aim for and to work towards. I think it's a national problem for those that have done reasonably well, but for the majority of the population is still that survival mode.
My last issue on family and our children and the next generation is you are blessed that your 4 kids have done very well and they're in business. I am finding that a lot of friends, relatives and so forth, are battling with their kids who are dealing with drugs. They've been to Australia, they've been to New Zealand, they've been wherever, and are battling just to make it because this mollycoddling might have affected them. Is that your sense?
It is. It is. Yeah. The the spoiling that they would have gone through would have put them in a very bad position. But you see, when you talk about drugs, anything that brings addiction is a curse as far as I'm concerned.
As Nyaradzo, we strive to continuously bring convenience to our clients. Nyaradzo Group is proud to introduce Sawi, a new virtual chatbot assistant on WhatsApp. With Sawi, you are now able to interact with us from the comfort of your home and can be assisted anytime via WhatsApp. With life assurance products, diaspora products, applying and assessing your policy, payment platforms, claims information, and any other queries concerning payments, policy information, or products and services. Simply WhatsApp Sawi on +263 712 992892 or register and start interacting and receiving notifications from Sawi on WhatsApp. Now, join in and experience a new level of convenience 24 hours a day with Sawi.
So, I know one of the things that you're so proud of. We're talking about our kids getting into drugs and so forth, and you've got an experience on about as far as that is concerned. And after 16 years of chain smoking, you managed to give up smoking. How important was doing that? And first of all, and the struggle of doing it, and the satisfaction of having achieved it.
Yeah, addiction is a very serious thing. If my experience with nicotine is anything to go by, I smoked more than 30 cigarettes per day for some 16 years. And well, we got into this in school because we thought it was fashionable.
Macho.
Yes, it was fashionable. Form 1, Form 2, Peter Stuyvesant and international passport to smoking pleasure.
A packet and matches, and you're walking around, you're showing off.
Then I was hooked onto that. And I was wanting to give up almost every day of my life. We'll go drinking with friends. On my way back, I would throw away all the cigarettes and so on. First thing in the morning, I'll be running to the next kiosk to buy cigarettes. So it was tough. I could not imagine a life without
nicotine,
without cigarettes. But I had to persevere and find some strategy of giving up. And I realized you could not give up cigarettes. Then
why did you want to give up?
It was bad for my health. It was bad for domestic environment. It was expensive. There's nothing good about it. You know, all the macho thing about it had gone. So,
but you couldn't let go.
I could not give up. So I had to find strategies. So I switched to smoking a pipe, and that did not work until I switched to smoking a cigar. With cigars, well, scientifically, don't inhale as much because you damage your, it is painful if you try to inhale too much. And anyway, long story short, I gave up. And since I gave up, I just vowed that I would not get addicted to anything in life again. So I enjoy a beer or a gin and tonic every now and again, but 1 or 2 months every year, I have to stop completely, just to check that
I can do without.
I can do without, I'm not dependent. Yeah. So I can imagine now with what they term stronger drugs that they are selling on the market. The young people very easily get drawn into this. They think it's fashionable, they think it's the thing to do at parties. And they get to themselves into a hell of a mess.
Terrible.
And getting away from that, I would imagine, must be much, much more difficult.
Yeah, it is, and it destroys lives.
Yeah.
It ruins a lot of lives. Yeah. One of the things I was joking with you as we're starting that you don't remember this, but my fond memory of you is playing golf with you at Rua Country Club, and you were battling with your swing, and on the tee box you were hitting the ball with your driver with your right hand, with your left hand behind you, which is a sign of determination to correct your swing. So one thing that you've done that I really have admired is your involvement with the Zimbabwe National Open Golf Committee since 2009, because I think looking from a distance, it's done a lot of good for the country in terms of raising the profile as a tourist destination and flying the flag. So you resuscitated the Zimbabwe Open Golf in 2009?
Yes, in 2009, after it had gone off the radar for 8 years due to economic hardships, scarcity of foreign currency and so on. And since 2009, it is run very successfully every year. It's part of the Sunshine Tour.
Wow.
And the professionals and the administrators that have come to this country, every time we host this Zimbabwe Open, they believe is the Masters Tournament of Africa, as far as they are concerned.
That's good.
They believe we do it much better than anywhere else that they know
on
the continent. So, it's been running very well up until 2020, the advent of COVID-19.
Oh, right.
So we had to skip in 2020. And we are hoping to restart in 2021. That did not happen. 2022, this tournament, the Zimbabwe Open Tournament, will be held in May, 19 May to 22 May. And the good news is, late last year, 2021, we were approached by the European Tour. I did say we are part of the Sunshine Tour. The European Tour does co-sanction national open tournaments in South Africa and in Kenya. They wanted to do that for Zimbabwe because they had heard about the way that it is run in this country. Unfortunately, we did not put together, we put together the Zimbabwe dollars, but we did not put together the foreign currency in good time to launch the European Tour, which is now called DP World Tour, in 2022. So we are still having the Zimbabwe Open as part of the Sunshine Tour, 19 to 22 May. And it's going to be held at Royal Harare Golf Club and at Chapman Golf Club. The first time that we're doing it on 2 courses as a dress rehearsal for the European tour that is coming. It's a much bigger tour. Prize money for the European tour minimum is €1 million. For the Sunshine Tour, we've been doing it at a level of 2.5 million, 2,500,000 rand as the prize money. But that should not scare our sponsors going forward, because when we get onto the European tour, there are TV rights and so on, and all that generates income, and it will be a much bigger tournament.
Wow.
So we're looking forward to a big tournament this year, up to 200 golfers. They will play Chapman and Royal on Thursday and Friday, switching over the 2 days. Those that make the cut will then go to the final course and do the final 2 days.
Tell me, why were you not able to raise the Forex? You put together the Zim dollars.
Yeah.
Why not the Forex? I mean, I would have thought that this is something where the Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, everybody moves the world to make this happen.
Well, in the past, before 2021, we were self-sufficient in that we were not going to the Ministry of Finance or the Central Bank to get the Forex to do this, because we could do it on our own. So the answer is we had not approached them. We had tried to do it on our own, but going forward, the Central Bank has come out in full support that they will support this initiative
that's
going
good news.
forward.
That's music to my ears. That. So we spoke about your success in giving up smoking. I know you have failures that you would want to share. The interesting thing about your failures is that your failures have actually been door openers to opportunities. And I think that's what a lot of us don't realize, that sometimes failure is good because it actually directs you to your purpose. Talk to me about the things that you failed to accomplish that ended up being a blessing.
Well, a lot.
Let's talk about 3 or 2.
A lot, in fact. There were many things that I wanted to do that did not work out, but with a bit of hindsight, you say to yourself, wow. Right, coming out of secondary school, for example, I did tell you about going to many interviews, but before university, I wanted to go into what was called RISCO then, which is now called Zisco. They were taking young people as apprentices. But again, in the black community, they were taking a very limited number of artisans. When they wrote the exams,
failed.
Must have passed with flying colors. But the story was they were only taking children of employees there. So if I had succeeded in that, I would have ended up being an artisan at Zisco.
So it was a good thing that you failed.
Yeah, I don't know if that would have been a success.
Right.
Yeah. So, in terms...
Failing to get the Standard Chartered Bank CEO job landed you at FBC?
At FBC, yes. Yeah, it was a target for me that I wanted to be chief executive for Standard Chartered. But I ended up at FBC, a startup bank at that time, built it, it grew up with me, I grew up as well, and it was much more rewarding. In fact, much more rewarding than it would have been if I had stayed at Standard Chartered, because at Standard Chartered I would have been in a pigeonhole. You know, I mean, just repeating what they were doing the last 100 years. But here was an opportunity to grow something, grow with it, and the results are amazing. The number of people that succeeded out of association with FBC, and I also succeeded in the process. So, I'm very happy about
what would you say to young people watching you right now as far as failure is concerned? How should they deal with failure?
When you can achieve what you want to do at a particular point, it's just a temporary setback, and you're probably, there's a bigger force joining, directing you at much better things. If you look at what I consider successful people out there that I would dream of matching, when you read their stories, they would have failed. Some of them dropped out of school, some of them. But that made them focus on what else they wanted to do, and they became much more successful that way.
I've already spoken to you about your love for golf. I mean, this show would be incomplete, and talking to Livingstone Gwata without talking about golf. You are a member of the Shumba Golf Society. You've been for a long time. You're a member of the Nomads Golf Club. Share with us, Livingstone, the benefits of being a golfer. Some people say that golf is almost like going through life, the ups and downs of life. I mean, I've been a golfer myself, a terrible one at that. I gave up because I couldn't be a golfer. But you have a good game, you have a terrible game, you have a good shot, you have a terrible shot. What are the lessons that you've gotten from golf? One thing that I've gotten from golf is friendships. Yes. Some of the close friends I have, I got those friends from playing 4 hours on the golf course with them. What have been the benefits that you've derived from playing golf?
Well, I've been playing golf for more than 20 years, and golf, like most other organized sports, gives you discipline. It gives you a very strong network of people, socially, business-wise. But more importantly, it gives you a chance to live with failure, a chance to live with success. You will notice, Trevor, that, my observation, playing golf and playing squash. I played league squash for a number of years in my young days, both in this country, in Europe, and in Asia. In all these countries, there were politicians wanting to play squash. And I've met politicians wanting to play golf. Now, sport gives you almost instant feedback. If you're succeeding, it tells you you're succeeding. If you're failing, it tells you you're failing. I've noticed with squash and golf that doesn't sit very well with politicians.
That's interesting.
You will never find anywhere in the world politicians that want to play sport, because there is a true result.
Yeah. You can't rig it, you can't fake it.
It exposes you. If you can do it, it comes out well. I've known even locally politicians wanting to play golf and so on, and in most cases, they were wanting to record a different score from what they got.
I can't believe that. They cheat on the golf course.
Wow, they do that. In the United States, you've heard of the famous ones at the top.
Yeah.
And it's not only one, all of them. So golf is about discipline. Golf is about being honest. Golf is about it's about performance.
Yeah.
Sport is about performance. Instant feedback. It helps you. It gives you the network. So I'm a member of Shumba Golf Society, and I'm a member of Nomads. the advantage of those associations is that you get an avenue to give to charity. Nomads is particularly strong on charity and supporting charities. So you have a lot of fun and you support charities. And I say this because when you look in our town here, the number of beggars that you see in the street and so on, it's very easy to be tempted to say, let me do my bit. But the downfall with this, as I saw it my 18 months or so in Ethiopia and Eritrea, working for Standard Chartered back then, the number of beggars in the street. Begging becomes an institution where people are going to virtually damage their own babies.
So that they create an opportunity to beg.
They use them for. So, Nomads, Shumba Golf Society are organizations that have got a big potential for us to, as members, to channel resources, and hopefully these resources will go to the qualifying charities and
Good on you.
utilized properly.
Good on you. Livingstone, you and I could go on. I mean, I would have loved for you to share with our viewers at home your work as an expatriate, but you know, time is not on our side. Let's talk about something that our viewers at home love, which is books. And I know you love reading. Share with us 3 books, Livingstone, that have had a huge impact on you.
Whew, yeah, okay. We used to read a lot of hard copy books growing up. But now with the internet, we tend to want to focus on what we can find on the web. But off the top of my mind, I've read a book, Why Nations Fail. I have read a book, In the Footsteps of Mr. Cash. I've read a book, was it 2 or 3 weeks in
December or something?
In December. That was about Zimbabwe.
That's by Rogers, eh?
Yes. So, but Why Nations Failed is a book that left a big imprint on my mind because I'd always wondered, what is wrong with the so-called third world? What is wrong with Africa? Why don't things work as they should? And I think this book, Why Nations Fail, hit the nail on the head in their research, what has happened in the past, and what is it that causes nations to fail. Is the strength of institutions. Unfortunately, our institutions are pretty young. They're pretty young and the institutions are pretty weak. I know it is very easy to blame colonialization and so on. We had institutions before we were colonized, but they were not as refined. Colonization came in and was meant to divide and rule and destroy institutions. And that has done a lot of damage to the people. But going forward, I think if we're to respect institutions, whatever those institutions are, not to follow personal whim or what this particular person, whether it's a business, just following what the leader wants, or without proper institutions that have to be respected. So the third world, and Africa in particular, has got a lot to learn. And we see all these pitfalls, and it's explained in that book. So I really...
It's a great book by Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson.
True.
Interestingly, James Robinson and Darren Acemoglu have done a new book. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Yeah.
It's called The Narrow Corridor, State, Societies, and the Fate of Liberty. I have read it. It's amazing. I agree with you. Why Nations Fail is a must read by all business people and everybody wanting to go into politics.
Yes. Or anyone that doesn't want to be frustrated by what they see happening around them.
Exactly. Livingstone, wow, what a great conversation. That's going to talk to a lot of people's lives and impact on a lot of people's lives. You are looking so well. You don't look like a pensioner at all. We wish you all the very best, Livingstone, as you run around. I know you sit on a number of boards and you continue to be fully engaged with the nation. So thank you so much for your time. I don't take this for granted at all.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for having me. I do hope I've made some contribution to your program.
Huge. Allow me, remain where you allow me to tend to our viewers who are all over the world. This has become a global conversation. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for watching the show. Remember, we are a weekly show. We are out on YouTube on Mondays at 7 o'clock Central African time. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, such as one I've just now had with Livingstone Gwata, I invite you to press on this red button and subscribe. If you subscribe, you receive an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations. We have gone a step further. Yes, we have. We now have podcasts on Spotify and other platforms. Please, scroll down below this video and you'll find the links. Click to the link for your listening pleasure. Until next time, cheers to you all.